Hey everybody! Perfect. All right. Are we excited to read more book? I know I am. Who have we got hanging out today? Who's in my chat? Who's in my chat? Won't even show me. All right, so I am just gonna let you guys know right off the bat that we might, small chance, might finish part 1 today. It kind of depends on like how we keep the pace up, like how into it we are, when people get here, all of that fun stuff. If that's the case, I think what we're gonna do, because looking at it last night, which was the first time I honestly took a look at like our table of contents, I think we're gonna wait to have Jackie and Lexi back, until the end of part 2, because part 1 is quite short, but part 2 is quite long. It's going to be that, or it's going to be when we kind of hit halfway. I haven't totally decided yet, but I feel like 1 week is just a little bit soon to ask them to come back and have more to say, unless like something really intense and like big and crazy that like we absolutely have to ask them about immediately happens. I don't think I'm gonna like put that on them to come back for Wednesday. So that's where we're at with that. Other than that, we may finish part 1 today, which would be exciting, because what it sounds like, just based on the titles that she's given to the parts, we may get her back in the night for part 2, maybe. Or at least like on her way there, because like right now we're in part 1. Hey, Sote! Right now in part 1, it's called Princess of Carrion, and part 2 is called Cursebreaker. So that makes me wonder if maybe. But anyway, yeah, so if we don't finish part 1 today, I also should say, if we don't finish, then there's not going to be like probably enough chapters to only do up until the end of part 2 on Wednesday. So we would read like the rest of part 1 and then a little bit into part 2 on Wednesday, if we do that. So yeah, we're going to kind of play it by ear a little bit. I'm also trying a new thing where I'm reading it on my computer instead of on my tablet, which is good for my eye line and better for my back, I think, so I'm not hunched over here reading. But it also means that, like, for some reason on the web version, it doesn't give me, like, how long it takes to read the chapter. It just kind of gives me, like, what percentage through the book you're in, which I don't, like, you know, I don't hate it, but it also means that I can't really judge based on time, which is usually how I kind of judge it. So I may have to flip back. I don't know what we're for today. We're going to try it, and we're going to see how much it messes with me. And if I hate it, then I hate it. And that's it. As usual, or as becoming usual, I have alcohol with me. I brought the terrible rum that I don't like back over here. I don't like this Bacardi, I just don't. But we gotta get through it. I have to use it up. And my partner specifically said, don't use any of the nice alcohol for this. So we're using the bad rum. I found our shot glass because my fancy crystal glass is dirty. So this is clean, but it's also very large. So I will not be filling this all the way, just as I do not fill the shared glass all the way. Just don't do it. I have water, so I'm safe. And then at some point, lunch will get here and I'll have to go because I'll need to eat. If I'm drinking and I find that my stomach is like gonna die and I haven't really eaten much today. I had a Frappuccino and a snack this morning, that's it. I do have a cornbread muffin from last night still on my desk that I didn't eat. This will be fun. Yeah, so we're still going with mate as the only rule. Whenever Rasand comes back, I want to add hands in the pockets because he seems to do it a lot. I really like it. Or like anytime he does something that's just like super like sultry emo boy, I feel like we need to do something for that to recognize just how great it is. Like when he's like leaning on the wall, or when he's like looking down and he's brooding, or any of that stuff, because I love it. Okay, so yes, I am very excited. Chapter 4, remember we are heading into the summer solstice. So they're having a party. And Alice just revealed to her that she kind of like knows that she's there, sneaking around, being a sneaky sneak. And that Alice is on her side, right? And so we're like, can we trust her? Can we not? I think we should because I like Alice. And I think she is to be trusted, but that's me. Oh, I paused the rock playlist and we're putting on the chill beats playlist or the background music playlist, you know? That's what we're doing. Oh, there we go. Oh no, boom, 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 boom. So I know Sote is here. I don't know who else is here because my telling me who is in chat thing is just clearly incorrect. It's just obviously wrong. From the way that from what I can see on here, it's just wrong. Oh. Here, let's see. No, it says it's up to date. It's incorrect though, Twitch. You're wrong. So there's that. So I hope that the rest of the regular crew will pop in at some point so they don't miss too much. But otherwise, welcome if you are not part of a regular crew. Yeah, see, Soda says I'm not sure either. It's weird. Yep, it's weird. But that's cool. I will say for those of you that don't know, I am also doing a fundraiser at the moment. I'm mirrored, so I always forget. So it's up here in the corner. I have to do better about telling everybody about it. Pippa, no, you're wearing your jacket. Yay! And you're bringing up Nashville, which is perfect because I was just about to bring it up. I can't wait to see it, by the way. So exciting. I was working on my boots last night and the other night. When they're a little bit more done, I will show everybody my boots. But yeah, I am doing a fundraiser at the moment because I am going to the Nashville Jamboree for Last Podcast Network. I've been planning events for people. I've been setting up meet and greet and get together doodly-dees and put a lot of work into it. But it is also very expensive to get from Toronto to Nashville and to stay there and to do all the things. So I am fundraising. It's not listed anywhere, but now that we've added drinking to our reading streams, I will take a shot for I'm going to say $10 donation. $10 donation for a shot, just because I'm already taking shots. Just because I'm already drinking. It's more expensive on reading days. And the more drunk I get, the weirder the reading gets. which is kind of fun, but also kind of weird. $25 or more gets you a signed pinup photo of myself. Nice 8x10 glossy mailed directly to you. There's some good examples of the type of photos that I regularly send out at dottiechampagne.ca on my website and the shop page. But there's also always my Instagram at Dottie Champagne if you want to take a look at the stuff that I've posted. It's your choice. You can select whichever photo you like. I'll do it a nice little signature on there, give you a nice little note. If you're a regular, I'll definitely write you a note about how much I love you. And then I'll mail it off to you. So that's the big incentive for $25 or more, but $10 I'll take a shot. And we're working really hard to try to get that bar to go a little bit further as the Jamboree approaches for June. June 17th, that weekend, whatever weekend that is. So soon, so not particularly far away. So yeah, donations are always appreciated. Yeah, and so I may remind people later as more folks trickle in, but for now, let's update our chapter tracker and let's get on to chapter 4. Because I do want to, if we can, finish part 1 today. I would love to do that. Just get it done. Find out what's happening. Get a little further in, because the truth is, the further we get into to part 1, the sooner we can, like within a reasonable period, have Jackie and Lexi back. This is also a very long book. We're going to be reading it for a very long time, I think, unless we just like buckle down and just do it. Plus there's The Court of Frost and Starlight, which is the shorter novel, but like looking at it, it's kind of about as long as the first book. So really, it's still not like short. And then A Court of Silver Flames, which is from Nesta's perspective, is quite long as well. And still in the same universe. And from what I'm gathering from the internet, now that I'm getting all kinds of stuff suggested to me, people like it quite a bit. And it's quite good. So I'm excited for that. I'm worried that during the conversation, see, I'm not even drinking yet and I'm stuttering, with Jackie and Lexi, that when I said I was concerned about Nesta, that they and maybe you guys thought that like I don't like her or something. Like, no, I love her. I'm just worried for her. She's a bitch and I love it. I wish she would chill out with Elaine a little bit, just because I also am concerned about Elaine's health. But I appreciate the fact that she loves her sister very much, and that's good. I just don't want her to become consumed with revenge to a degree that ruins the rest of her life. I hope she's happy, and I hope that her and Cassian can figure it out, because that would be hot and good for them. So, yeah. Anyway, we are going to go on to chapter 4. I'm so excited. Let's turn my music down a little bit for myself. You guys are probably getting an okay level, but it was hurting my ears a little bit. Here we go, chapter 4. Summer Stolz. First fucking word, guys. Summer solstice was exactly as I had remembered. Streamers and ribbons and garlands of flowers everywhere. Casks of ale and wine hauled out to the foothills surrounding the estate. High fae and lesser fairies alike flocking to the celebrations. But what had not existed here a year ago was Ianthe. The celebrating would be sacrilege, she intoned, if we did not give thanks first. So we all were up 2 hours before the dawn, bleary-eyed, and none of us too keen to endure her ceremony as the sun crested the horizon on the longest day of the year. I wondered if Tarquin had to weather such tedious rituals in his shining palace by the sea. Wondered what sort of celebrations would occur in Adriata today with the High Lord of Summer, who had come so very close to being a friend. As far as I knew, despite the murmurings between servants, Tarquin still had never sent word to Tamlin about the visit Rhys, Amren, and I had made. What did the Summer Lord now think of my changed circumstances? I had little doubt Tarquin had heard, and I prayed he stayed out of it until my work here was finished. Alice had found me a luxurious white velvet cloak for the brisk ride into the hills, and Tamlin had lifted me onto a moon-pale mare with wildflowers woven into her silver mane. If I had wanted to paint a picture of serene purity, it would have been the image I cast that morning, my hair braided above my head, a crown of white hawthorn blossoms upon it. I dabbed rouge onto my cheeks and lips, a slight hint of color, like the first blush of spring across a winter landscape. As our procession arrived at the hill, a gathered crowd of hundreds already atop it, all eyes turned to me. But I kept my gaze ahead, to where Ianthe stood before a rudimentary stone altar, bedecked in flowers and the first fruits and grains of summer. The hood was off her pale blue robe for once, the silver circlet now resting directly atop her golden head. I smiled at her, my mare obediently pausing at the northern arc of the half-circle that the crowd had formed around the hill's edge and Ianthe's altar, and wondered if Ianthe could spy the wolf grinning beneath. Tamlin helped me off the horse, the grey light of pre-dawn shimmering along the golden threads in his green jacket. I forced myself to meet his eyes as he set me on the soft grass, aware of every other stare upon us. The memory gleamed in his gaze, in the way his gaze dipped to my mouth. A year ago, he had kissed me on this day. A year ago, I danced amongst these people, carefree and joyous for the first time in my life, and had believed it was the happiest I'd ever been and ever would be. I gave him a little shy smile and took the arm he extended. Together, we crossed the grass toward Ianthe's stone altar, the Highburn royals, Jurian and Lucian, trailing behind. I wondered if Tamlin was also remembering another day all those months ago, when I'd worn a different white gown, when there had also been flowers strewn about. When my mate... Damn it, 8! Okay. Disgusting. When my mate had rescued me after I'd decided not to go through with the wedding, some fundamental part of me knowing it wasn't right, I had believed I didn't deserve it. Hadn't wanted to burden Tamlin for an eternity with someone as broken as I'd been at the time. And Rhys? Rhys would have let me marry him, believing me to be happy, wanting me to be happy, even if it killed him. But the moment I had said no, he had saved me, helped me save myself. I glanced sidelong at Tamlin, but he was studying my hand, braced on his arm, the empty finger where that ring had once perched. What did he make of it? Where did he think that ring had gone, if Lucian had hidden the evidence? For a heartbeat, I pitied him. Pitied that not only Lucian had lied to him, but Alice as well. How many others had seen the truth of my suffering and tried to spare him from it? Seen my suffering and done nothing to help me. Tamlin and I paused before the altar, Ianthe offering us a serene, regal nod. The Highburn royals shifted on their feet, not bothering to hide their impatience. Brana had made barely veiled complaints about the solstice at dinner last night, declaring that in Highburn they did not bother with such odious things and got on with the revelry, and implying in her way that soon neither would we. I ignored the royals as Ianthe lifted her hands and called to the crowd behind us. "A blessed solstice to us all." Then began an endless string of prayers and rituals, her prettiest young acolytes assisting with the pouring of sacred wine, with the blessing of the harvest gods on the altar, with beseeching the sun to rise. A lovely rehearsed little number. Lucian was half asleep beside me. But I'd gone over the ceremony with Ianthe, and knew what was coming when she lifted the sacred wine and intoned, "As the light is strongest today, let it drive out unwanted darkness. Let it banish the black stain of evil." Jab after jab at my mate. Oh. I need to start eating this muffin. Just to get the taste out of my mouth. Fuck. Oh, God. Urgent question. Should I be writing in Arial or Times New Roman? Tripping right now, to be honest. I always prefer Times New Roman if you're talking about just, like, standard, like, paragraphs. Because I think that a serif font is easier to read. But Arial is nice as well. Times New Roman is just my preferred. I'm also partial to a Helvetica, but... Page break moments are in Arial. Huh. All they're good choices. It's up to you, babe. It's a stylistic choice. And also the beauty of writing digitally, if you decide later you don't like it, you can always change it. And when it goes to print, there should be other people involved in the process and you can change it. Decimations, 10 sectors of decimation. Cornbread actually soaks up alcohol really well, so that's that was good at killing that. You're welcome, Demon Whiskey Nick. Always happy to help. Alright. Jab after jab at my mate, my home. But I nodded along with her. Would Princess Brana and Princess Dagdun do us the honor of imbibing this blessed wine? The crowd shifted. The Highburn royals blinked, frowning to each other. But I stepped aside, smiling prettily at them and gesturing to the altar. They opened their mouths, no doubt to refuse, but Ianthe would not be denied. Drink, and let our new allies become new friends, she declared. Drink, and wash away the endless night of the year. The two Daemati were likely testing that cup for poison through whatever magic and training they possessed, but I kept the bland smile on my face as they finally approached the altar and Brana accepted the outstretched silver cup. They each barely had a sip before they made to step back, but Ianthe cooed at them, insisting they come behind the altar to witness our ceremony at her side. I had made sure she knew precisely how disgusted they were with her rituals, how they would do their best to stomp out her usefulness as a leader of her people once they arrived. She now seemed inclined to convert them. More prayers and rituals, until Tamlin was summoned to the other side of the altar to light a candle for the souls extinguished in the past year, to now bring them back into the light's embrace when the sun rose. Pink began to stain the clouds behind them. Jurian was also called forward to recite one final prayer I'd requested Ianthe add in honor of the warriors who fought for our safety each day. And then Lucian and I were standing alone in the circle of grass, the altar and horizon before us, the crowd at our backs and sides. From the rigidity of his posture, the dart of his gaze over the sight, I knew he was now running through the prayers and how I had worked with Ianthe on the ceremony, how he and I remained on the side of the line right as the sun was about to break over the world, and the others had been maneuvered away. Ianthe stepped toward the hill's edge, her golden hair tumbling freely down her back as she lifted her arms to the sky. The location was intentional, as was the positioning of her arms. She'd made the same gesture on winter solstice, standing in the precise spot where the sun would rise between her upraised arms, filling them with light. Her acolytes had discreetly marked the place in the grass with a carved stone. Slowly, the golden disk of the sun broke over the hazy greens and blues of the horizon. Light filled the world, clear and strong, spearing right for us. Ianthe's back arched, her body a mere vessel for the solstice's light to fill, and what I could see of her face was already limned in pious ecstasy. The sun rose, a held gilded note echoing through the land. The crowd began to murmur, then cry out, not at Ianthe, but at me. At me, resplendent and pure in white, beginning to glow with the light of day as the sun's path flowed directly over me instead. Ooh! No one had bothered to confirm or even notice that Ianthe's marker stone had moved 5 feet to the right, too busy with my parading arrival to spy a phantom wind slide it through the grass. Ooh, girl! It took Ianthe longer than anyone else to look, to turn to see that the sun's power was not filling her, blessing her. I released the damper on the power that I had unleashed in Highburn, my body turning incandescent as light shone through. Pure as day, pure as starlight. Cursebreaker, some murmured. Blessed, others whispered. I made a show of looking surprised and yet accepting of the cauldron's choice. Tamlin's face was taut with shock. The Highburn Royals' nothing short of baffled. Feyre, you sneaky. But I turned to Lucian, my light radiating so brightly that it bounced off his metal eye, a friend beseeching another for help. I reached a hand toward him. Beyond us, I could feel Ianthe scrambling to regain control, to find some way to spin it. Perhaps Lucian could, too, for he took my hand and then knelt upon one knee in the grass, pressing my fingers to his brow. Like stalks of wheat in a wind, the others fell to their knees as well. For in all of her preening ceremonies and rituals, never had Ianthe revealed any sign of power or blessing. But Feyre Cursebreaker, who had led Prythian from tyranny and darkness, blessed, holy, undimming before evil. I let my glow spread until it, too, rippled from Lucian's bowed form. A night before his queen. When I looked to Ianthe and smiled again, I let a little bit of the wolf show. Feyre! Ooh. That's dangerous. That's a dangerous game to play, but very powerful, and I'm excited to see what happens. Ooh. Demon Whiskey Nick, thank you for gifting a sub. You're so nice. Oh, and look, and it went to my partner, which is perfect. By the way, hi honey, I know you're watching. He's also just in the other room, so. The festivities, at least, remained the same. Once the uproar and awe had ebbed, once my own glow had vanished, when the sun crested higher than my head, we made our way to the nearby hills and fields, where those who had not attended the ceremony had already heard about my small miracle. I kept close to Lucian, who was inclined to indulge me, as everyone seemed to be torn between joy and awe, question and concern. Ianthe spent the next 6 hours trying to explain what had happened. The cauldron had blessed her chosen friend, she told whoever would listen. The sun had altered its very path to show how glad it was for my return. Only her acolytes really paid attention, and half of them appeared only mildly interested. Tamlin, however, seemed the wariest, as if the blessing had somehow upset me, as if he remembered that same light in Hybern and could not figure out why it disturbed him so. But duty had him fielding thanks and good wishes from his subjects, warriors, and the lesser lords, leaving me free to wander. I was stopped every now and then by fervent, adoring fairies who wished to touch my hand, to weep a bit over me. Once I would have cringed and winced. Now I received their thanks and prayers beatifically, thanking them, smiling at them. Some of it was genuine. I had no quarrel with the people of these lands who had suffered alongside the rest. None. But the courtiers and sentries who sought me out, I put on a better show for them. Cauldron blessed, they called me. An honor, I merely replied. On and on I repeated those words, through breakfast and lunch, until I returned to the house to freshen up and take a moment for myself. In the privacy of my room, I set my crown of flowers on the dressing table and smiled slightly at the eye tattooed into my right palm. The longest day of the year, I said into the bond, sending along flickers of all that had occurred atop that hill. I wish I could spend it with you. He would have enjoyed my performance, would have laughed himself hoarse afterward at the expression on Ianthe's face. I finished washing up and was about to head out into the hills again when Rasan's voice filled my mind. It'd be an honor, he said, laughter in every word, to spend even a moment in the company of Farah Cauldron Blessed. I chuckled. The words were distant, strained. Keep it quick. I had to keep it quick or risk exposure. And more than anything, I needed to ask, needed to know. Is everyone all right? I waited, counting the minutes. Yes, as well as we can be. When do you come home to me? Each word was quieter than the last. Soon, I promised him. Hybern is here. I'll be done soon. He didn't reply, and I waited another few minutes before I again donned my flower crown and strode down the stairs. Oh, he wants her to come home. Q. As I emerged into the bedecked garden, though, Rasan's faint voice filled my head once more. I wish I could spend today with you, too. The words wrapped a fist around my heart, and I forced them from my mind as I returned to the party in the hills, my steps heavier than they'd been when I floated into the house. But lunch had been cleared away, and dancing had begun. I saw him waiting on the outskirts of one of the circles, observing every move I took. I glanced between the grass and the crowd and the cluster of musicians coaxing such lively music from drums and fiddles and pipes as I approached, no more than a shy, hesitant doe. Once, those same sounds had shaken me awake, had made me dance and dance. I suppose they were now little more than weapons in my arsenal as I stopped before Tamlin, lowered my lashes, and asked softly, "Will you dance with me?" Relief, happiness, and a slight edge of concern. "Yes," he breathed. "Yes, of course." So I let him lead me into the swift dance, spinning and tilting me, people gathering to cheer and clap. Dance after dance after dance, until sweat was running down my back as I worked to keep up, keep that smile on my face, to remember to laugh when my hands were within strangling distance of his throat. She's like really aggressive. She's like ready to murder this man. I don't know why it makes me laugh every time. The music eventually shifted into something slower, and Tamlin eased us into the melody. When others had found their own partners more interesting to watch, he murmured, "This morning. Are you alright?" My head snapped up. Yes, I don't know what that was, but yes. Is Ianthe mad? I don't know. She didn't see it coming. I don't think she handles surprises very well. I should apologize. His eyes flashed. What for? Perhaps it was a blessing. Magic still surprises me. If she's angry, it's her problem. Yep. Accurate. I made a show of considering, then nodded. Pressed closer, loathing every place where our bodies touched. I didn't know how Rhys had endured it. Endured Amarantha. For 5 decades. You look beautiful today, Tamlin said. Thank you. I made myself peer up into his face. Lucian told me that you didn't complete the rite on Kellen Mai. That you refused. And you let Ianthe take him into that cave instead. His throat bobbed. I couldn't stomach it. And yet you could stomach making a deal with Hybern, as if I were a stolen item to be returned. Maybe this morning was not just a blessing for me, I offered. A stroke of his hand down my back was his only reply. That was all we said for the next 3 dances, until hunger dragged me toward the tables where dinner had now been laid out. I let him fill a plate for me, let him serve me himself as we found a spot under a twisted old oak and watched the dancing and the music. I nearly asked if it was worth it, if giving up this sort of peace was worth it in order to have me back. For Hybern would come here, use these lands, and there would be no more singing and dancing, not once they arrived. But I kept quiet as the sunlight faded and night finally fell. The stars winked into existence, dim and small above the blazing fires. I watched them through the long hours of celebrating, and could have sworn they kept me company, my silent and stalwart friends. It's their anniversary. Tamlin's just like, I love you. And she's like, that's nice. Oh my god. That little thing with Rhys, that was cute. I pity Tamlin. I feel really bad for him. I think he's so misled. Yes, he's terrible, but he needs some help. The man needs help. Somebody help this man. Get him a therapist, something. I don't know. Everybody needs therapy. What am I even talking about? Anyway, chapter 5. I crawled back to the manor 2 hours after midnight, too exhausted to last until dawn. T-Boom Whiskey Nick. Oh, I'm glad you love this vibe. I mean, it's totally worth going back and watching the old archive VODs and catching up on the books and then coming back live later, too. Like, definitely hang out now. We love having you, but, yeah, it's definitely worth checking it back. It's a great companion just for background noise, and there's hours and hours of it. Especially when I noticed the way Tamlin looked at me, remembering the dawn last year when he'd led me away and kissed me as the sun rose. I asked Lucian to escort me, and he'd been more than happy to do so, given that his own status as a mated male made him uninterested in any sort of female company these days. I will count it, but fuck. Ew. So fucking gross. And given that Ianthe had been trying to corner him all day to ask about what had happened at the ceremony, I changed into my nightgown, a small, lacy thing I had once worn for Tamlin's enjoyment and now was glad to don thanks to the day's sweat still clinging to my skin, and flopped into bed. For nearly half an hour, I kicked at the sheets, tossing and turning, thrashing. The Ator, the Weaver, my sisters being thrown into the cauldron. All of them twined and eddied around me. I let them. Most of the others were still celebrating when I yelped, a sharp, short cry that had me bouncing from the bed. My heart thundered along my veins, my bones, as I cracked open the door, sweating and haggard, and padded across the hall. Lucian answered on the second knock. "I heard you. What's wrong?" He scanned me, russet eye wide as he noted my disheveled hair, my sweaty nightgown. I swallowed, a silent question on my face, and he nodded, retreating into the room to let me inside. Bare from the waist up, he'd managed to haul on a pair of pants before opening the door, and hastily buttoned them as I strode past. His room had been bedecked in autumn court colors, the only tribute to his home he'd ever let show, and I surveyed the night-dark space, the rumpled bedsheets. He'd perched on the rolled arm of a large chair before the blackened fire, watching me wring my hands in the center of the crimson carpet. "I dream about it," I rasped, "under the mountain. And when I wake up, I can't remember where I am." I lifted my now unmarred left arm before me. "I can't remember when I am." Truth, and half a lie. I still dreamed of those horrible days, but no longer did they consume me. No longer did I run to the bathroom in the middle of the night to hurl my guts up. "What did you dream of tonight?" he asked quietly. I dragged my eyes to his, haunted and bleak. She had me spiked to the wall, like Claire Bedore. And the Ator was... I shuddered, running my hands over my face. Lucian rose, stalking to me. The ripple of fear and pain at my own words masked my scent enough, masked my own power as my dark snares picked up a slight vibration in the house. Lucian paused half a foot from me. He didn't so much as object as I threw my arms around his neck, burying my face against his warm, bare chest. In the seawater from Tarquin's own gift that slipped from my eyes, down my face, and onto his golden skin. Oh, so she's fake crying using magic. That's cool. That's cool! Lucian loosed a heavy sigh and slid an arm around my waist, the other threading through my hair to cradle my head. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I'm sorry." He held me, stroking soothing lines down my back, and I calmed my weeping, those seawater tears drying up like wet sand in the sun. I lifted my head from his sculpted chest at last, my fingers digging into the hard muscles of his shoulders as I peered into his concerned face. I took deep, heaving breaths, my brows nodding and mouth parting as I... "What's going on?" Lucian whipped his head toward the door. Tamlin stood there, face a mask of cold calm, the beginnings of claws glinting at his knuckles. We pushed away, too swiftly to be casual. "I had a nightmare," I explained, straightening my nightgown. I didn't want to wake the house." Tamlin was just staring at Lucian, whose mouth had tightened into a thin line as he marked those claws, still half drawn. "I had a nightmare," I repeated a bit sharply, gripping Tamlin's arm and leading him from the room. before Lucian could do so much as open his mouth. I closed the door, but could still feel Tamlin's attention fixed on the mail behind it. He didn't sheath his claws, didn't summon them any further either. I strode the few feet to my room, watching Tamlin assess the hall, the distance between my door and Lucian's. "Good night," I said, and shut the door in Tamlin's face. Ooh, she is just being terrible to him. Oh my god. I waited the 5 minutes it took Tamlin to decide not to kill Lucian, and then smiled. I wondered if Lucian had pieced it together, that I had known Tamlin would come to my room tonight, after I had given him so many shy touches and glances today. That I had changed into my most indecent nightgown, not for the heat, but so that when my invisible snares in the house informed me that Tamlin had finally worked up the nerve to come to my bedroom, I'd look the part. A feigned nightmare, the evidence set into place with my thrashed sheets. I'd left Lucian's door open, with him too distracted and unsuspecting of why I'd really be there to bother to shut it, or notice the shield of hard air I'd placed around the room, so that he wouldn't hear or scent Tamlin as he arrived. Until Tamlin saw us there, limbs entwined, my nightgown askew, staring at each other so intently, so full of emotion, that we either just been starting or finishing up. That we didn't even notice until Tamlin was right there, and that invisible shield vanished before he could sense it. A nightmare, I'd told Tamlin. I was the nightmare, preying on what Tamlin had feared from my very first days here. I had not forgotten that long ago fight he'd picked with Lucian, the warning he'd given him to stop flirting with me, to stay away, the fear that I'd preferred the red-haired lord over him, and that it would threaten every plan he had. "Back off," he'd told Lucian. I had no doubt Tamlin was now running through every look and conversation since then. Every time Lucian had intervened on my behalf, both under the mountain and afterward, weighing how much that new mating bond with Elaine had sway over his friend. Considering how this very morning Lucian had knelt before me, swearing fealty to a newborn god, as if we had both been cauldron blessed. I let myself smile for a moment longer, then dressed. There was more work to do. Feyre. She got all the pieces to this puzzle, which is really interesting considering how she generally is quite dumb. She's gotten a lot smarter. She's smartened up. That training really did a lot. She's so smart. I liked that a lot. I love the sneaky. It's fun. Okay. Chapter 6. Moving on. A set of keys to the estate gates had gone missing. Ooh. But after last night's incident, Tamlin didn't appear to care. Breakfast was silent, the Hybern royals sullen at being kept waiting so long to see the second cleft in the wall, and Jurian, for once, too tired to do anything but shovel meat and eggs into his hateful mouth. Tamlin and Lucian, it seemed, had spoken before the meal, but the latter made a point to keep a healthy distance from me, to not look at or speak to me, as if still needing to convince Tamlin of our innocence. I debated asking Jurian outright if he'd stolen the keys from whatever guard had lost them, but the silence was a welcome reprieve. until Ianthe breezed in, carefully avoiding acknowledging me, as if I was indeed the blinding sun that had been stolen from her. I am sorry to interrupt your meal, but there is a matter to discuss, High Lord, Ianthe said, pale robes swirling at her feet as she halted halfway to the table. All of us perked up at that. Tamlin, brooding and snarly, demanded, "What is it?" She made a show of realizing the Highburn royals were present, listening. I tried not to snort at the oh-so-nervous glance she threw their way, then to Tamlin. The next words were no surprise whatsoever. "Perhaps we should wait until after the meal, when you're alone." No doubt a power play, to remind them that she did in fact have sway here, with Tamlin. That Highburn, too, might want to remain on her good side, considering the information she bore. But I was cruel enough to say sweetly, "If we can trust our allies in Highburn to go to war with us, then we can trust them to use discretion. Go ahead, Ianthe. Anything you can say to me, you can say in front of our friends." She didn't so much as look in my direction. But now caught between outright insult and politeness, Tamlin weighed our company against Ianthe's posture and said, "Let's hear it." Her white throat bobbed. "There is... My acolytes discovered that the land around my temple is... dying." "Oh no." Jurian rolled his eyes and went back to his bacon. Bacon! I love bacon. I know that's real normie of me, but I do like bacon. "Then tell the gardeners," Brana said. Returning to her own food, that was the wrong voice, but whatever. Dagden snickered into his cup of tea. "It is not a matter of gardening," Ianthe straightened. "It is a blight upon the land. Grass, root, bud, all of it shriveled up and sickly. It reeks of the Naga." It was an effort not to glance to Lucian, to see if he also noticed the too-eager gleam in her eye. Even Tamlin loosed a sigh, as if he saw it for what it was, an attempt to regain some ground, perhaps a scheme to poison the earth and then miraculously heal it. "There's a mimosa down here. Want some?" "Wah, it's a Mimi." "I know, you just want to show everybody that you're here. And to maybe get some corn muffin." Oh. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, Mimi. Oh my goodness. Yes, that's a nice smelling candle, but you can't touch it because it's hot. Come on, back to the book. Back to the book. Don't be a pain. "There were other spots in the wood where things have died and are not coming back," Ianthe went on, pressing a silver-adorned hand to her chest. "I fear it's a warning that the Naga are gathering and plan to attack." Oh, I'd gotten under her skin. I'd been wondering what she'd do after yesterday's solstice, after I robbed her of her moment and power. But this? Clever. I hid my smirk down deep and said gently, "Ianthe, perhaps it is a case for the groundskeepers?" She stiffened, at last facing me. "You think you're playing the game," I used to tell her. "But you have no idea that every choice you made last night and this morning were only steps I nudged you toward." I jerked my chin toward the royals, then Lucian. "We're heading out this afternoon to survey the wall, but if the problem remains when we return in a few days, I'll help you look into it." Those silver-ringed fingers curled into loose fists at her sides, but like the true viper she was, Ianthe said to Tamlin, "Will you be joining them, High Lord?" She looked to me and Lucian, the assessment too lingering to be casual. A faint, low headache was already forming, made worse with every word out of her mouth. I'd been up too late and gotten too little sleep, and I needed my strength for the days ahead. "He will not," I said, cutting off Tamlin before he could reply. He set down his utensils. "I think I will." I don't need an escort. Let him unravel the layers of defensiveness in that statement. Jurian snorted. "Starting to doubt our good intentions, High Lord." Tamlin snarled at him. "Careful." I placed a hand flat on the table. "I'll be fine with Lucian and the sentries." Lucian seemed inclined to sink into his seat and disappear forever. I surveyed Dagden and Brana and smiled a bit. "I can defend myself if it comes to that," I said to Tamlin. The Daimate smiled back at me. I hadn't felt another touch on my mental barriers, or the ones I'd been working to keep around as many people here as possible. The constant use of my power was wearing on me, however. Being away from this place for 4 or 5 days would be a welcome relief. Especially as Ianthe murmured to Tamlin, "Perhaps you should go, my friend." I waited for whatever nonsense was about to come out of that pouty mouth. "You never know when the Night Court will attempt to snatch her away." Rude. I had a blink to debate my reaction. To opt for leaning back in my chair, shoulders curling inward, hauling up those images of Claire, of Reese with those ash arrows through his wings. Any sort of way to dredge my scent in fear. "Have you news?" I whispered. Brana and Dagden looked very interested at that. The priestess opened her mouth, but Jurian cut her off, drawling, "There's no news. Their borders are secure. Rhysand would be a fool to push his luck by coming here." I stared at my plate. The portrait of bowed terror. Bowed terror! "A fool, yes," Ianthe countered, "but one with a vendetta." She faced Tamlin, the morning sun catching in the jewel atop her head. "Perhaps if you return to him his family's wings, he might settle." For a heartbeat, silence rippled through me, followed by a wave of roaring that drowned out nearly every thought, every self-preserving instinct. I could barely hear over the bellowing in my blood, my bones. But the words, the offer, a cheap attempt at snaring me. I pretended not to hear, not to care, even as I waited and waited for Tamlin's reply. When Tamlin answered, his voice was low. "I burned them a long time ago." I don't know if that's good or bad. I could have sworn there was something like remorse and shame in his words. Ianthe only tisked. "Too bad. He might have paid handsomely for them." My limbs ached with the effort of not leaping over the table to smash her head into the marble floor. But I said to Tamlin, smooth and gentle, "I'll be fine out there." I touched his hand, brushing my thumb over the back of his palm, held his stare. "Let's not start down this road again." As I pulled away, Tamlin merely fixed Lucian with a look, any trace of that guilt gone. His claws slid free, embedding in the scar-flecked wood of his chair's arm. "Be careful." None of us pretended it was anything but a threat. Ooh. Being spicy. It was a 2-day ride, but took us only a day to get there with winnowing, walking, winnowing. That was written winnowing hyphen walking hyphen winnowing. That's weird. We could manage a few miles at a time, but Dagden was slower than I'd anticipated, given that he had to carry his sister and Jurian. I didn't fault him for it. With each of us bearing another, the drain was considerable. Lucian and I both bore a sentry, minor lords' sons who had been trained to be polite and watchful. Supplies, as a result, were limited, including tents. By the time we made it to the cleft in the wall, darkness was falling. The few supplies we'd hauled also had encumbered our winnowing through the world, and I let the sentries erect the tents for us, ever the lady keen to be waited on. Our dinner around the small fire was near silent, none of us bothering to speak, save for Jurian, who questioned the sentries endlessly about their training. The twins retreated to their own tent after they'd picked at the meat sandwiches we'd packed, frowning at them as if they were full of maggots instead. And Jurian wandered off into the woods soon after, claiming he wanted a walk before he retired. The twins share a tent. I really think they're fucking, and I don't like it. We don't need twincest, guys. We don't need it. I hauled myself into the canvas tent when the fire was dying out. The place barely big enough for Lucian and me to sleep shoulder to shoulder. His red hair gleamed in the faint firelight a moment later as he shoved through the flaps and swore. Why are they sharing a tent?
Maybe I should sleep out there.
I rolled my eyes. Please. A wary, considering glance as he knelt and removed his boots.
You know Tamlin can be sensitive about things.
He can also be a pain in my ass, I snapped and slithered under the blankets. If you yield to him on every bit of paranoia and territorialism, you'll just make it worse. Lucian unbuttoned his jacket but remained mostly dressed as he slid into his sleeping bag and onto his sleeping roll.
I think it's made worse because you two haven't... you haven't, right?
Why are you asking her this? Oof. This writer flings romantic moments around like I fling battle moments. Yes, yeah, she's very much so trying to make everything steamy kind of as often as possible, which I'm into. It's part of why we're here. We're here for the smut. But they're not gonna fuck. They're not. Because he wants her sister. And she's already spoken for. I stiffened, tugging the blanket higher onto my shoulders. No, I don't want to be touched like that. Not for a while. His silence was heavy, sad. I hated the lie. Hated it for how filthy it felt to wield it.
I'm sorry,
he said. And I wondered what else he was apologizing for as I faced him in the darkness of our tent. Isn't there some way to get out of this deal with Highburn? My words were barely louder than the murmuring embers outside. I'm back. I'm safe. We could find some way around it.
No. The King of Highburn crafted his bargain with Tamlin too cleverly. Too clearly. Magic bound them. Magic will strike him if he does not allow Highburn into these lands.
In what way? Kill him? Lucian's sigh ruffled my hair.
It will claim his own powers. Maybe kill him. Magic is all about balance. That's why he couldn't interfere with your bargain with Rasand. Even the person who tries to sever the bargain faces consequences. If he'd kept you here, the magic that bound you to Reese might have come to claim his life as payment for yours. Or the life of someone else he cared about. It's old magic. Old and strange. It's why we avoid bargains unless it's necessary. Even the scholars at the day court don't know how it works. Believe me, I've asked.
For me? You asked them for me.
Yes. I went last winter to inquire about breaking your bargain with Reese.
Why didn't you tell me?
We didn't want to give you false hope. We didn't dare let Rassant get wind of what we were doing in case he found a way to interfere, to stop it.
So Ianthe pushed Tamlin to Highburn instead.
He was frantic. The scholars at the day court worked too slowly. I begged him for more time, but you'd already been gone for months. He wanted to act, not wait, despite that letter you sent. Because of that letter you sent. I finally told him to go ahead with it after that day in the forest.
I turned onto my back, staring at the sloped ceiling of the tent. How bad was it? I asked quietly.
You saw your room. He trashed it. The study. His bedroom. He killed the sentries who'd been on guard. After he got the last bit of information from them. He executed them in front of everyone in the manor.
Fuck, Tamlin! My blood chilled. You didn't stop him.
I tried. I begged him for mercy. He didn't listen. He couldn't listen.
The sentries didn't try to stop him either?
They didn't dare. Feyre, he's a high lord. He's a different breed.
I wondered if he'd say the same thing if he knew what I was.
We were backed into a corner with no options. None. It was either go to war with the Night Court and Highburn, or ally with Highburn, let them try to stir up trouble, and then use that alliance to our own advantage further down the road.
What do you mean? I breathed. But Lucian realized what he'd said and hedged.
We have enemies in every court. Having Highburn's alliance will make them think twice.
Liar. Trained, clever liar. I loosed a heavy, sleepy breath. Even if they're now allies, I mumbled. I still hate them.
Me too. Get up!
Blinding sunlight cut into the tent, and I hissed. The order was drowned out by Lucian's snarl as he sat up.
Out!
He ordered Jurian, who looked us over once, sneered, and stalked away. Oh. Jurian. He's gonna play right into her trying to make this a thing. I'd rolled onto Lucian's bedroll at some point, and his schemes indeed second to my most pressing demand, warmth. But I had no doubt Jurian would tuck away the information to throw in Tamlin's face when we returned. We'd shared a tent, and had been very cozy upon awakening. Snuggles! That's just snuggling. That's nothing. That's just friends doing a cuddle. I washed in the nearby stream, my body stiff and aching from a night on the ground, with or without the help of a bedroll. Brana was prowling for the stream by the time I'd finished. The princess gave me a cold, thin smile. I picked Baron's son too. I stared at the princess beneath lowered brows. She shrugged, her smile growing. Autumn Court males have fire in their blood, and they fuck like it too. Ooh, spicy, spicy, spicy. Ah. Yes. Yeah, yes. Yeah. I'll pick Lucian. I pick him. I'm into it. I'm into it! I suppose you know from experience? A chuckle. Why do you think I had so much fun in the war? I didn't bother to hide my disgust. Lucian caught me cringing at him when her words replayed for the 10th time an hour later, while we hiked the half-mile toward the crack in the wall.
What?
He demanded. I shook my head, trying not to imagine Elaine subject to that fire. Yeah, don't think about your sister fucking this guy. But go for her. Right? Maybe just be like, well, good for Elaine. Good for my sister. She gets the spicy boy. She gets the spicy boy. Nothing, I said, just as Jurian swore ahead. We were both moving as he barked a curse, and then broke into a run at the sound of a sword whining free of its sheath. Leaves and branches whipped at me, but then we were at the wall, that invisible, horrible marker, humming and throbbing in my head. And staring right at us through the hole were 3 children of the blessed. Are we gonna learn more about this freaky cult? Yes! Oh, I need to know more about what the fuck happens to these people. God damn it. But Lucian's spicy. I'm so glad we know that now about him and his family being spicy fuckboys. Okay. I love a firepower person. I'm so into it. I'm so into it. Burn me! But don't actually burn me. I don't want to be burnt. I don't like being burnt. I don't like it. But I'm a bit of a firebug. I'll admit it. Hence the candles all around me. But yeah. Ooh. Chapter 7. Rana and Dagden looked like they'd just found second breakfast waiting for them. Second breakfast? What about third breakfast? Jurian had his sword out. The 2 young women and 1 young man gaped between them at the others. Then at us, their eyes widening further as they noted Lucian's cruel beauty. They dropped to their knees. Masters and mistresses, they beseeched us, their silver jewelry glinting in the dappled sunlight through the leaves. You have found us on our journey. The 2 royals smiled so broadly I could see all of their 2 white teeth. Jurian, for once, seemed torn before he snapped. What are you doing here? The dark-haired girl at the front was lovely. Her honey gold skin flushed as she lifted her head. We have come to dwell in the immortal lands. We have come as tribute. Jurian cut cold, hard eyes to Lucian. Is this true? Lucian stared him down.
We accept no tribute from the human land, least of all children.
Never mind that the 3 of them appeared only a few years younger than myself. Yeah, quick reminder for everybody. Feyre is at most 20 right now. She could be 19 still. She's a child, basically. The big fucking choices. Why don't you come through, Rana cooed, and we can enjoy ourselves. She was indeed sizing up the brown-haired young man and the other girl. Her hair was a ruddy brown, face sharp, but interesting. From the way Dagden was leering at the beautiful girl in front, I knew he'd silently made his claim already. I shoved in front of them and said to the 3 mortals, Get out. Go back to your villages, back to your families. You cross this wall and you will die. They balked, rising to their feet, faces taut with fear and awe. We have come to live in peace. There is no such thing here. There is only death for your kind. Their eyes slid to the immortals behind me. The dark-haired girl blushed at Dagden's intense stare, seeing the high fae beauty and none of the predator. So I struck. The wall was a screeching, terrible vice, crushing my magic, battering my head. But I speared my power through that gap and slammed into their minds. Too hard. The young man flinched a bit. So soft, defenseless. Their minds yielded like butter melting on my tongue. I beheld pieces of their lives, like shards in a broken mirror, flashing every which way. The dark-haired girl was rich, educated, headstrong, had wanted to escape an arranged marriage, and believed Prithian was a better option. The ruddy-haired girl had known nothing but poverty and her father's fists, but to turn more violent after they'd ended her mother's life. The young man had sold himself on the streets of a large village until the children had come one day and offered him something better. Oh my god! I worked, quickly, neatly. I was finished before 3 heartbeats had passed, before Brana had even drawn breath to say, "There is no death here, only pleasure if you're willing." Even if they weren't willing, I wanted to add. But the 3 of them now blinked, balking, beholding us for what we were. Deadly, merciless, the truth behind the spun stories. "We perhaps have made a mistake," their leader said, retreating a step. "Or perhaps this was fate," Brana countered with a snake's smile. They kept backing away, kept seeing the histories I'd planted into their minds. That we were here to hurt and kill them. That we had done so with all their friends. That we use and discard them. I showed them the Naga, the Bogue, the Midgard worm. I showed them Claire and the golden-haired queen skewered on that lamppost. The memories I gave them became stories they had ignored, but now understood with us before them. "Come here," Dagden ordered. The words were kindling to their fear. The 3 of them turned, heavy, pale robes twisting with them, and bolted for the trees. Brana tensed, as if she'd charged through the wall after them. But I gripped her arm and hissed, "If you pursue them, then you and I will have a problem." In emphasis, I dragged mental talons down her own shield. The princess snarled at me. But the humans were already gone. I prayed they'd listen to the other command I'd woven into their minds. To get on a boat, get as many friends as they could, and flee for the continent. The return here only when the war was over, and to warn as many humans as possible to get out before it was too late. The Highburn Royals growled their displeasure, but I ignored it as I took up a spot against a tree and settled in to wait, not trusting them to stay on this side of the border. The Royals resumed their work, stalking up and down the hill, up and down the wall. A moment later, a male body came up beside me. Not Lucian, I realized with a jolt, but did not so much as flinch. Jurian's eyes were on the place where the humans had been. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough. "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied, well aware that Lucian carefully watched from the shade of a nearby oak. Jurian gave me a knowing smirk and sauntered after Dagden. They took all day. Whatever it was they were inspecting, whatever they were hunting for, the Royals didn't inform us. And after the confrontation that morning, I knew pushing them into revealing it wouldn't happen. I'd used up my allotted tolerance for the day. So we spent another night in the woods, which was precisely how I wound up sitting across the fire from Jurian after the twins had crawled into their tent and the sentries had taken up their watch positions. Lucian had gone to the stream to get more water, and I watched the flame dance amongst the logs, feeling it echo inside myself. Spearing my power through the wall had left me with a lingering, pounding headache all day, more than a bit dizzy. I had no doubt sleep would claim me fast and hard. But the fire was too warm, and the spring night too brisk to willingly breach that long gap of darkness between the flame and my tent.
What happens to the ones who don't make it through the wall?
Durian asked, the hard panes of his face cast in flickering relief by the fire. I ground the heel of my boot into the grass. I don't know. They never came back. They never came back once they went over. But while Amarantha ruled, creatures prowled these woods, so I don't think it ended well. I've never encountered a mention of them being at any court.
500 years ago, they'd have been flogged for that nonsense,
Durian said.
We were their slaves and whores and laborers for millennia. Men and women fought and died so we'd never have to serve them again. Yet there they are, in those costumes, unaware of the danger, the history.
Careful, or you might not sound like Hybern's faithful pet. A low, hateful laugh.
That's what you think I am, isn't it? His dog. Yeah, Pilgrim.
What's the end goal then?
I have unfinished business.
Miriam is dead. That madness danced again, replacing the rare lucidity.
Everything I did during the war, it was for Miriam and me. For our people to survive and one day be free. And she left me for that pretty-faced prince the moment I put my people before her.
I heard she left you because you became so focused on wringing information from Clythia that you lost sight of the real conflict.
Miriam told me to go ahead and fuck her for information. Told me to seduce Clythia until she'd sold out all of Hybern and the Loyalists. She had no qualms with that. None.
So all of this is to get Miriam back? He stretched his long legs before him, crossed one ankle over the other.
Is to draw her out of her little nest with that winged prick and make her regret it.
You get a second shot at life, and that's what you wish to do? Revenge? Durian smiled slowly.
Isn't that what you're doing?
Months of working with Reese had me remembering to furrow my brow in confusion. Against Reese, I would one day like it.
That's what they all say when they pretend he's a sadistic murderer. You forget I knew him in the war. You forget he risked his legion to save Miriam from our enemy's fort. That's how Amarantha captured him, you know. Reese knew it was a trap for Prince Draken. So Reese went against orders, marched in his whole legion to get Miriam out. For his friends, for my lover, and for that bastard Draken's sake. Reese sacrificed his legion in the process. Got all of them captured and tortured afterward. Yet everyone insists Rhysand is soulless, wicked. But the male I knew was the most decent of them all. Better than that prick prince. You don't lose that quality, no matter the centuries. And Reese was too smart to do anything but have the vilification of his character be a calculated move. And yet here you are, his mate. Fuck. It's okay, the drunker I get, the more like John Wayne I will sound. Because that man was a drunk.
Right, Demon Whiskey Nick? It was so good. That John Wayne thing was great. I loved it. Sote, you need to listen to all of Behind the Bastards. I love that show. It is very good. Very interesting. I regularly remind people that chiropractors believe there are ghosts in your bones. And that you probably shouldn't go see one. Because of the series they did on chiropractic. I gotta crack the ghosts out of your bones. That's what I say to my mom every time she goes to see her chiropractor, because she believes in it. She thinks it cured her allergies. I don't begrudge anybody something that makes them feel better, but dem's defects. Anyway. And yet here you are, his mate. The most powerful High Lord in the world lost his mate and has not yet come to claim her, even when she is defenseless in the woods. Yeah, Frost is part of Zero Cool Media and Last Podcast. No, wait, no, Zero Cool Media isn't Behind the Bastards. The Behind the Bastards is a different different network that has cool in the name. What is it again? I'm forgetting now. But no, it's different. Because Zero Cool Media is Cena's own thing. I believe. But I don't know. There's so many threads. Anyway. Durian chuckled. Perhaps that's because Rasan has not lost you at all, but rather unleashed you upon us. Now I gotta look it up, Demon Whiskey Nick. Now I'm confused. Okay, so. Zero Cool Media. You know, like I said, they've got a different. No. Zero Cool is just Cena's thing. Behind the Bastards is. Cool Zone Media. Behind the Bastards is Cool Zone Media, and Zero Cool Media is Cena's thing that has. See, they're like so similar. I do not blame you for getting them confused. But yeah, no, they are different. No problem. See, we have to untangle these webs. It's important. Anyway. Durian's, he's letting things slip. He knows. He's figured it out. So he just said, Rasan has not lost you at all, but rather unleashed you upon us. I had never heard that story. But it seemed so like my mate that I knew the flames between us now smoldered in my eyes as I said, "You love to hear yourself talk, don't you?" "I burn, I'll kill all of you," was all Durian replied. I gotta take another shot. It is like really hot in my apartment today. I don't have a fan. And the way the City of Toronto bylaws work, they can't turn the AC on until the 30th of May, which is dumb. And it's really fucking hot in here, and I got this dog on my lap, and she's really hot. I'm sweaty. I'm melting. Ugh. That's how it is in Chicago too? Yep. Oh, it's so dumb. I wish I could just have control over my own apartment. Like, there's a fan in the system if I just want to push the hot air around, but that doesn't do anything. And I've got so much window going on. It's like a greenhouse in here. In the winter, it's freezing. This glass isn't a good insulator, but in the summertime, it's like, whoo. It looked great. Looks awesome. Fucking hot, though. Amy, I'm so sorry. I know you're comfy. And I know you're just gonna want to jump up here again. But you have to get off of my lap because you're too sweaty and hot. And I'm sweaty and hot. I don't know how you're standing it. My partner just went out to go pick up our lunch on his bike, and I can't imagine how sweaty he's gonna be when he comes back. So we were out earlier, it was hot. Hey. It's sticky in here. Back to the book. Jurian wasn't wrong. Lucian woke me the next morning with a hand over my mouth, warning gleaming in his rusted eye. I smelled it a moment later. The coppery tang of blood. We shoved into our clothes and boots. And I did a quick inventory of the weapons we'd squeezed into the tent with us. I had 3 daggers. Lucian had 2, as well as an elegant short sword. Better than nothing, but not much. No, I haven't seen it, Demon Whiskey. We should watch that later. Check that out. A glance from him communicated our plan well enough. Play casual until we assessed the situation. Yeah, who's dead? I had a heartbeat to realize that this was perhaps the first time he and I had worked in tandem. Hunting had never been a joint effort, and under the mountain, he'd been one of us looking out for the other. Never a team. A unit. Lucian slid from the tent, limbs loose and ready to shift into a defensive position. He'd been trained, he once told me, at the Autumn Court and at this one. Like Reese, he usually opted for words to win his battles, but I'd seen him and Tamlin in the practice ring. He knew how to handle a weapon, how to kill if need be. I pushed past him, devouring the details of my surroundings as if I were a starving man at a feast. The forest was the same. Jurian was crouched before the fire, stirring the embers back to alertness. His face, a hard, brooding mask. But the sentries? They were pale as Lucian stalked to them. I followed their shifting attention to the trees behind Jurian. No signs of the royals. The blood. A coppery tang, yes, but laced with earth and marrow and rot. Mortality. I stormed for the trees and dense brush. You're too late, Jurian said as I passed him, still poking the embers. They finished them 2 hours ago. Lucian was on my heels as I shoved into the brambles, thorns tearing at my hands. The Hybern royals hadn't bothered to clean up their mess. From what was left of the 3 bodies, their shredded pale robes like fallen ashes through the small clearing, Dagden and Brana must have shut out their screams with some sort of shield. Lucian swore.
They went through the wall last night to hunt them down.
Even with hours separating them, the royals were fey. Swift, immortal. The 3 children of the blessed would have tired after running, would have camped somewhere. Blood was already drying on the grass, on the trunks of the surrounding trees. Hybern's brand of torture wasn't very creative. Claire, the Golden Queen, and these 3. similar mutilating and torment. I unfastened my cloak and carefully laid it over the biggest remains of them I could find. The torso of the young man, clawed up and bloodless. His face was still etched in pain. Flame heated in my fingertips, begging me to burn them, to give them at least that sort of burial, but... Do you think it was for sport? Or to send us a message? Lucian laid his own cloak across the remains of the two young women. His face was as serious as I'd ever seen it.
I think they aren't accustomed to being denied. I'd call this an immortal temper tantrum.
I closed my eyes, trying to calm my roiling stomach.
You aren't to blame,
He added.
They could have killed them out in the mortal lands, but they brought them here to make a statement about their power.
He was right. The children of the blessed would have been dead even if it hadn't interfered. They're threatened, I mused, and proud to a fault. I towed the blood-soaked grass. Do we bury them? Lucian considered.
It sends a message that we're willing to clean up their messes.
I surveyed the clearing again, considered everything at stake. Then we send another sort of message. Ooh, they're doing bad. They're doing bad out there. Those guys. Those bad guys. I don't like them. They're bad and awful. Murdering people. They're knocking outside. What the heck is going on out there? Nobody's coming in through my window. No, thank you. Not interested. I did see a, not entirely well person out on our walk earlier today, and that's just city living, you know? There are all kinds of unwell people just hanging out in the area all the time. Isn't it fun? Isn't it fun? All right. Oof. My capture card is very hot right now. That's not good. We don't want that. Need to get a fan. Oof. So I wonder what they're gonna do with the bodies. That's concerning. Just leave them out there to die. Tamlin paced in front of the hearth in his study, every turn as sharp as a blade. They are allies, he growled at me, at Lucian. Both of us seated in armchairs flanking the mantel. They're monsters, I countered. They butchered 3 innocents. And you should have left it alone for me to deal with. Tamlin heaved a jagged breath. Not retaliated like children. He threw a glare in Lucian's direction. I expected better from you. But not from me, I asked quietly. Tamlin's green eyes were like frozen jade. You have a personal connection to those people. He does not. That's the sort of thinking, I snapped, clutching the armrests, that has allowed for a wall to be the only solution between our two peoples. For the Fae to look at these sorts of murders and not care. I knew the guards outside could hear. Knew anyone walking by could hear. The loss of any life on either side is a personal connection. Or is it only high Fae lives that matter to you? Tamlin stopped short, stopped short. He stopped short! And snarled at Lucian. Get out. I'll deal with you later. Don't you talk to him like that, I hissed, shooting to my feet. You have jeopardized this alliance with that stunt. Oh, you have jeopardized this alliance with that stunt you two pulled. Good. They can burn in hell for all I care, I shouted. Lucian flinched. You sent the Bogue after them. Yeah, they did. Tamlin roared. I didn't so much as blink, and I knew the sentries had heard, indeed, by the cough of one outside, a sound of muffled shot. And I made sure those sentries could still hear as I said, they terrorized those humans, made them suffer. I figured the Bogue was one of the few creatures that could return the favor. Lucian had tracked it down, and we'd lured it carefully over hours back to that camp. Right to where Dagdan and Brana had been gloating over their kill. They'd managed to get away, but only after what had sounded like a good bit of screaming and fighting. Their faces remained bloodless even hours later, their eyes still brimming with hate whenever they deigned to look at us. Lucian cleared his throat. Stood as well.
Tam, those humans were barely more than children. Favor gave the royals an order to stand down. They ignored it. If we let Hybern walk all over us, we stand to lose more than their alliance. The Bogue reminded them that we aren't without our claws, too.
Tamlin didn't take his eyes off me as he said to Lucian, Get out! There was enough violence in the words that neither Lucian nor I objected this time as he slipped from the room and shut the double doors behind him. I speared my power into the hall, sensing him sitting on the foot of the stairs, listening, as the 6 sentries in the hall were listening. I said to Tamlin, my back ramrod straight, You don't get to speak to me like that. You promised you wouldn't act this way. You have no idea what's at risk. Don't you talk to me. Don't you talk down to me. Not after what I went through to get back here to you, to our people. You think any of us are happy to be... You think any of us are happy to be working with Hybern? You think I don't see it in their faces? The question of whether I am worth the dishonor of it? His breathing turned ragged again. Good. I wanted to urge him. Good. You sold us out to get me back, I said, low and cold. You whored us out to Hybern. Forgive me if I am now trying to regain some of what we lost. Claws slid free. A feral growl ripped out of him. They hunted down and butchered those humans for sport, I went on. You might be willing to get on your knees for Hybern, but I certainly am not. He exploded. Furniture splintered and went flying. Windows cracked and shattered. And this time, I did not shield myself. The work table slammed into me, throwing me against the bookshelf, and every place where flesh and bone met wood barked and ached. My knees slammed into the carpeted floor, and Tamlin was instantly in front of me, hands shaking. The doors burst open.
What have you done?
Lucian breathed, and Tamlin's face was the picture of devastation as Lucian shoved him aside. He let Lucian shove him aside and help me stand. Something wet and warm slid down my cheek. Blood from the scent of it.
Let's get you cleaned up,
Lucian said, an arm around my shoulders as he eased me from the room. I barely heard him over the ringing in my ears, the slight spinning to the world. The sentries, Brawn and Hart, 2 of Tamlin's favorite lord warriors among them, were gaping, attention torn between the wrecked study and my face. Okay. Tamlin has officially done a hit, which has hurt. Not cool. Not cool. With good reason. As Lucian led me past a gilded hall mirror, I beheld what had drawn such horror. My eyes were glassy, my face pallid, save for the scratch just beneath my cheekbone, perhaps 2 inches long and leaking blood. Little scratches peppered my neck and hands, but I willed that cleansing, healing power, that of the High Lord of Dawn, to keep from seeking them out, from soothing them away. Feyre, Tamlin breathed from behind us. I halted, aware of every eye that watched me. I'm fine, I whispered. I'm sorry. I wiped at the blood dribbling down my cheek. I'm fine, I told him again. No one, not even Tamlin, looked convinced. And if I could have painted that moment, I would have named it a portrait in snares and baiting. She's making a point. Rhysand sent word down the bond the second I was soaking in the bathtub. Are you hurt? The question was faint, the bond quieter and tenser than it had been days ago. Sore, but fine. Nothing I can't handle. Though my injuries still lingered and showed no signs of a speedy healing, perhaps I'd been too good at keeping those healing powers at bay. The reply was a long time coming. Then it came all at once, as if he wanted to cram every word in before the difficulty of the distance silenced us. I know better than to tell you to be careful or to come home, but I want you home soon. I want him dead for putting a hand on you. Even with the entirety of the land between us, his rage rippled down the bond. I answered, my tone soothing, dry. Technically, his magic touched me, not his hand. The bath water was cold by the time his reply came through. I'm glad you have a sense of humor about this. I certainly don't. I sent back an image of me sticking out my tongue at him. My clothes were back on when his answer arrived. Like mine, it was wordless, a mere image. Like mine, Rhysand's tongue was out. But it was occupied with doing something else. Shit! Rhysand! Sending dirty images. Oh, sir? Stop it. Stop, but don't, but stop, but don't, but stop. No. I made a point to take a ride the next day. Made sure it was when Braun and Hart were on duty, and asked them to escort me. They didn't say much, but I felt their assessing glances at my every wince as we rode the worn paths through the spring wood. Felt them study the cut on my face, the bruises beneath my clothes that had me hissing every now and then. Still not fully healed to my surprise, though I supposed it worked to my advantage. Tamlin had begged my forgiveness at dinner yesterday, and I'd given it to him. But Lucian hadn't spoken to him all evening. Jurian and the Hybern Royals had sulked at the delay after I'd quietly admitted my bruises made it too difficult to accompany them to the wall. Tamlin hadn't possessed the nerve to suggest they go without me, to rob me of that duty. Not when he saw the purplish markings and knew that if they were on a human, I might have been dead. And the Royals, after Lucian and I had sent the Bogues invisible malice after them, had backed off, for now. I kept my shields up around myself and the others, the strain now a constant headache that had any extra sort of magic feeling feeble and thin. The reprieve on the border hadn't done much. No, it had made the strain worse after I'd sent my power through the wall. I'd invited Ianthe to the house, subtly requesting her comforting presence. She arrived knowing the full details of what had transpired in that study, letting it conveniently slip that Tamlin had confessed it to her, pleading for absolution from the Mother and the Cauldron and whoever else. I prattled about my own forgiveness to her that evening, and made a show of taking her good counsel, telling the courtiers and others at our crowded table that night how lucky we were to have Tamlin and Ianthe guarding our lands. Honestly, I don't know how none of them connected it. How none of them saw my words as not a strange coincidence, but a dare, a threat. That last little nudge. Especially when 7 Naga broke into the estate grounds just past midnight. They were dispatched before they reached the house, an attack halted by a cauldron-sent warning vision from none other than Ianthe herself. The chaos and screaming woke the estate. I remained in my room, guards beneath my windows and outside my door. Tamlin himself, blood-drenched and panting, came to inform me that the grounds were again secure, that the Naga had been found with the keys to the gate, and the sentry who had lost them would be dealt with in the morning. A freak accident. A final show of power from a tribe that had not gone gently after Amarantha's reign. All of us saved from further harm by Ianthe. We all gathered outside the barracks the next morning, Lucian's face pallid and drawn, purple smudges beneath his glazed eyes. He hadn't returned to his room last night. Beside me, the Hybern Royals and Jurian were silent and grim as Tamlin paced before the sentries strung up between 2 posts. "Don't murder this man for losing his keys! Shit happens, dude!" Like, it sucks, and yes, it's dangerous and bad, but you don't murder this man? God. "You were entrusted with guarding this estate and its people," Tamlin said to the shuddering male, already stripped down to his pants. "You were found not only asleep at the gate last night, but it was your set of keys that originally went missing," Tamlin snarled softly. "Do you deny this?"
I never fell asleep. It's never happened until now. I must have just nodded off for a minute or 2, the sentry stammered, the ropes restraining him, groaning as he strained against them.
"You jeopardized the lives of everyone in this manner." And it could not go unpunished. Not the Hybern Royals here, seeking any sign of weakness. Tamlin held out a hand. Braun, stone-faced, approached to give him a whip. All the sentries, his most trusted warriors, shifted about, some outright glaring at Tamlin, some trying not to watch what was about to unfold. I grabbed Lucian's hand. It wasn't entirely for show. Ianthe stepped forward, hands folded over her stomach. 20 lashes, and 1 more for the cauldron's forgiveness. The guards turned baleful eyes towards her. Tamlin unfurled the whip onto the dirt. I made my move, slid my power into the bound sentry's mind, and freed the memory I'd coiled up tightly in his head. Freed his tongue, too.
"It was her,"
he panted, jerking his chin to Ianthe.
"She took the keys."
Tamlin blinked, and everyone in that courtyard looked right to Ianthe. Her face didn't so much as flinch at the accusation. The truth he'd flung her away. I'd been waiting to see how she'd counter my showing of power at the solstice, tracking her movements that entire day and night. Within moments of my leaving the party, she'd gone to the barracks, used some glimmer of power to lull him to sleep, and taken his keys, then planted her warnings about the Naga's impending attacks after she gave the creatures the keys to the gates. So she could sound the alarm last night. So she could save us from a real threat. Clever idea, had it not played right into everything I'd laid out. Ianthe said smoothly, "Why should I take the keys? I warned you of the attack."
"You were at the barracks. I saw you that night,"
the sentry insisted, then turned pleading eyes to Tamlin. It wasn't fear of pain that repelled him, I realized. No, the lashings would have been deserved and earned and borne well. It was the fear of honor lost. "I would have thought one of your sentries, Tamlin, would have more dignity than to spread lies to spare himself from some fleeting pain." Ianthe's face remained serene as always. Tamlin, to his credit, studied the sentry for a long moment. I stepped forward. I will hear his story. Some of the guards loosed sighs. Some looked at me with pity and affection. Ianthe lifted her chin. With all due respect, my lady, it is not your judgment to make. And there it was, the attempt to knock me down a few pegs. Just because it would make her see red, I ignored her completely and said to the sentry, I will hear your story. I kept my focus on him, even as I counted my breaths, even as I prayed that Ianthe would take the bait. You'll take the word of a sentry over that of a high priestess? My disgust at her blurted words wasn't entirely feigned, even though hiding my faint smile was an effort. The guards shifted on their feet at the insult, the tone, even if they had not already trusted their fellow sentry from her words alone. They realized her guilt. I looked at Tamlin then, saw his eyes sharpen as well, with understanding. Too many protests from Ianthe. Oh, he was well aware that Ianthe had perhaps planned that Naga attack to reclaim some shred of power and influence as a savior of these people. Tamlin's mouth tightened in disapproval. I'd given them both a length of rope. I suppose now would be the moment to see whether they'd hang themselves with it. I dared one more step forward, upturning my palms to Tamlin. Perhaps it was a mistake. Don't take it from his hide or his honor. Let's hear him out. Tamlin's eyes softened a fraction. He remained silent, considering. But behind me, Brana snorted. Pathetic, she murmured, though everyone could hear it. Weak, vulnerable, ripe for conquest. I saw the words slam through Tamlin's face as if they were shutting doors in their wake. There was no other interpretation, not for Tamlin. But Ianthe assessed me, standing before the crowd, the influence I'd made so clear I was capable of stealing. If she admitted guilt, whatever she had left would come crumbling down. Tamlin opened his mouth, but Ianthe cut him off. There are laws to be obeyed, she told me, gently enough that I wanted to drag my nails down her face. Traditions. He has broken our trust, has let our blood be spilled for his carelessness. Now he seeks to accuse a high priestess of his failings. It cannot go unpunished. She nodded to Tamlin. 21 lashes, High Lord. I glanced between them, my mouth going dry. Please, just listen to him. The guard hanging between the posts had such hope and gratitude in his eyes. In this, my revenge edged towards something oily, something foreign and queasy. He would heal from the pain, but the blow to his honor? It'd take a little piece out of mine as well. Tamlin stared at me, then Ianthe, then glanced to the smirking Highburn royals, to Jurian, who crossed his arms, his face unreadable. And like I'd gambled, Tamlin's need for control, for strength, won out. Ianthe was too important an ally to risk isolating. The word of a low sentry? No, it did not matter as much as hers. Tamlin turned to the sentry tied to the posts. Put the bit in, he quietly ordered Bronn. There was a heartbeat of hesitation from Bronn, as if the shock of Tamlin's order had rippled through him, through all the guards, siding with Ianthe, over them, his sentries, who had gone over the wall again and again to try to break that curse for him, who had gladly done it, gladly died, hunted down as those wolves for him. And the wolf I'd felled, Andras, he'd gone willingly too. Tamlin had sent them all over, and not all of them had come back. They had gone willingly, yet this was his thanks, his gratitude, his trust. 21 long, beautiful Maybelline lashes. And applying lashes is difficult. Sure, it will not be a pleasant experience for him, especially if they get pokey. They had gone willingly, yet this was his thanks, his gratitude, his trust. But Bronn did as commanded, sliding the small piece of wood into the no-trembling sentry's mouth. Judging by the barely concealed disdain in the guards' faces, at least they were aware of what had occurred, or what they believed had occurred. The High Priestess had orchestrated this entire attack to cast herself as a savior, offering up the reputation of one of their own as the asking price. They had no idea, none, that I'd goaded her into it, pushed and pushed her to reveal just what a snake she was, how little anyone without a title meant to her, how Tamlin listened to her without question, to a fault. It wasn't much of an act when I put a hand to my throat, backing up a step, then another, until Lucian's warmth was against me, and I leaned fully into him. The sentries were sizing up Ianthe, the royals. Tamlin had always been one of them, fought for them. Until now, until Hybern, until he put these foreign monsters before them, until he put a scheming High Priestess before them. Tamlin's eyes were on us, on the hand Lucian put on my arm to steady me as he drew back the whip. The thunderous crack as it cleaved the air snapped through the barracks, the estate, through the very foundations of the court. It's all coming together. So now, his guards don't trust him or like him anymore. Don't alienate your army, you're gonna have a coup. Tamlin's gonna have a coup. Chapter 9. I think we can keep going. Let's do this. Yeah, okay. Chapter 9. Tara's acting like this whipping is her fault. She was so little to do with this happening. Right, Jade? Like she has very little to do with the actual, actions that have resulted here. She planted a couple of seeds. She fertilized them, she tended them, but she didn't really do much to get them growing. They're a very, this is an easy growing plant. Chapter 9. Ianthe wasn't done. I knew it, braced myself for it. She didn't flit back to her temple a few miles away. Rather, she remained at the house, seizing her chance to worm her way closer to Tamlin. She believed she'd gained a foothold, that her declaration of justice served at the bloody end of the whipping hadn't been anything but a final slap in the face to the guards who watched. And when that sentry had sagged from his bindings, when the others came to gently untie him, Ianthe merely ushered the Hybern party and Tamlin into the manor for lunch. But I'd remained at the barracks, tending to the groaning sentry, drawing away bloodied bowls of water while the healer quietly patched him up. Bronn and Hart personally escorted me back to the estate hours later. I thanked them each by name, then apologized that I hadn't been able to prevent it, Ianthe's scheming or the unjust punishment of their friend. I meant every word, the crack of the whip still echoing in my ears. Then, they spoke the words I'd been waiting for. They were sorry they hadn't stopped any of it, either. Not just today, but the bruises now fading, at last. The other incidents. If I had asked them, they would have handed me their own knives to slit their throats. The next evening, I was hurrying back to my room to change for dinner when Ianthe made her next move. She was to come with us to the wall tomorrow morning. Her and Tamlin, too. If we were all to be a united front, she declared over dinner, then she wished to see the wall herself. The Hybern royals didn't care, but Jurian winked at me as if he too saw the game in motion. I packed my own bags that night. Alice entered right before bed, a third pack in her hands. Since it's a longer trip, I brought your supplies. Even with Tamlin joining us, it was too many people for him to winnow us directly. So we'd go, as we'd done before, in segments, a few miles at a time. Alice laid the pack she'd prepared beside my own, picked up the brush on the vanity and beckoned me to sit on the cushioned bench before it. I obeyed. For a few minutes, she brushed my hair in silence. Then she said, "When you leave tomorrow, I leave too." I lifted my eyes to hers in the mirror. "My nephews are packed. The pony's ready to take us back to Summer Court territory at last. It has been too long since I saw my home," she said, though her eyes shone. "I know the feeling," was all I said. "I wish you well, lady," Alice said, setting down the brush and beginning to braid back my hair. "The rest of your days, however long they may be, I wish you well." I let her finish the plate, then pivoted back on the bench to grip her thin fingers in mine. "Don't ever tell Tarquin you know me well." Her brows rose. "There was a blood ruby with my name on it," I clarified. Even her tree bark skin seemed to blanch. She understood it well enough. I was a hunted enemy of the Summer Court. Only my death would be accepted as payment for my crimes. Alice squeezed my hand. "Blood rubies or no, you will always have one friend in the Summer Court." My throat bobbed. "And you will always have one in mine," I promised her. She knew which court I meant, and did not look afraid. The sentries did not glance at Tamlin, or so much as speak to him unless absolutely necessary. Braun, Hart, and 3 others were to join us. They had spotted me checking on their friend before dawn, a courtesy I knew none of the others had extended. Winnowing felt like wading through mud. In fact, my powers had become more of a burden than a help. I had a throbbing headache by noon, and spent the last leg of the journey dizzy and disoriented as we winnowed again and again. We arrived and set up camp in near silence. I quietly, shyly, asked to share a tent with Ianthe instead of Tamlin, appearing eager to mend the rift the whipping had torn between us. But I did it more to spare Lucian from her attention than to keep Tamlin at bay. Dinner was made and eaten, bedrolls laid out, and Tamlin ordered Braun and Hart on the first watch. Lying beside Ianthe without slitting her throat was an exercise in patience and control. But whatever the knife beneath my pillow seemed to whisper her name, I'd remind myself of my friends, the family that was alive, healing in the north. I repeated their names silently, over and over into the darkness. Rhysand, Mor, Cassian, Omrin, Asriel, Elaine, Nesta. I thought of how I had last seen them, so bloodied and hurting. Thought of Cassian's scream as his wings were shredded, of Asriel's threat to the king as he advanced on Mor. Nesta, fighting every step toward the cauldron. My goal was bigger than revenge, my purpose greater than personal retribution. Dawn broke, and I found my palm curled around the hilt of my knife anyway. I drew it out as I sat up, staring down at the sleeping priestess. The smooth column of her neck seemed to glow in the early morning sun leaking through the tent flaps. I weighed the knife in my hand. I wasn't sure I'd been born with the ability to forgive. Not for terrors inflicted on those I loved. For myself, I didn't care. Not nearly as much. But there was some fundamental pillar of steel in me that could not bend or break in this. Cole could not stomach the idea of letting these people get away with what they'd done. Ianthe's eyes opened, the teal as limpid as her discarded circlet. They went right to the knife in my hand, then to my face. "You can't be too careful while sharing a camp with enemies," I said. I could have sworn something like fear shone in her eyes. "Highburn is not our enemy," she said, a tad breathlessly. From her paleness as I left the tent, I knew my answering smile had done its job well. Yeah, it scared the shit out of her. Sitting there, holding a knife, staring at her while she sleeps. Fuck. Lucian and Tamlin showed the twins where the crack in the wall lay. And as they had done with the first two, they spent hours surveying it, the surrounding land. I kept close this time, watching them, my presence now deemed relatively unthreatening, if not a nuisance. We'd played our little power games, established I could bite if I wished, but we'd tolerate each other. "Here," Brana murmured to Dagden, jerking her chin to the invisible divider. The only markings were the different trees. On our side, they were the bright, fresh green of spring. On the other, they were dark, broad, curling slightly with heat, the height of summer.
The first one was better,
Dagden countered. I sat atop a small boulder, peeling an apple with a paring knife.
Closer to the western coast, too,
he added to his twin. This is closer to the continent, to the strait. I sliced deep into the flesh of the apple, carving out a hunk of white meat.
Yes, but we'd have more access to the High Lord's supplies.
Said High Lord was currently off with Durian, hunting for food more filling than the sandwiches we'd packed. Ianthe had gone to a nearby spring to pray, and I had no idea whatsoever where Lucian or the sentries were. Good. Easier for me as I shoved the apple slice into my mouth and sat around it. I should go for this one. They twisted toward me, Brana sneering and Dagden's brows high. What do you know of any of it? Brana demanded. I shrugged, cutting another piece of apple. You two talk louder than you realize. Shared accusatory glares between them. Proud, arrogant, cruel. I'd been taking their measure this fortnight. Unless you want to risk the other courts having time to rally and intercepting you before you can cross to the strait, I'd pick this one. Brana rolled her eyes. I went on, rambling and bored. But what do I know? You two have squatted on a little island for 500 years. Clearly you know more about Prithian and moving armies than me. Brana hissed. This is not about armies, so I will trust you to keep your mouth shut until we have use for you. I snorted. You mean to tell me all of this nonsense hasn't been to find a place to break through the wall and use the cauldron to also transport the mass of your armies here? She laughed, swinging her dark curtain of hair over her shoulder. The cauldron is not for transporting grunt armies. It's for remaking worlds. It's for bringing down this hideous wall and reclaiming what we were. I merely crossed my legs. I'd think that was an army of 10,000. You wouldn't need a magical... I'd think that with an army of 10,000, you wouldn't need any magical objects to do your dirty work. Our army is 10 times that, girl, Brana sneered. And twice that number if you count our allies in Valen, Montessere, and Rask. 200,000. Mother save us. You've certainly been busy all these years. I surveyed them, utterly nonplussed. Why not strike when Amarantha had the island? The king had not yet found the cauldron, despite years of searching. It served his purposes to let her be an experiment for how we might break these people, and served as good motivation for our allies on the continent to join us, knowing what would await them. I finished off my apple and chucked the core into the woods. They watched it fly, like two hounds tracking a pheasant. So they're all going to converge here? I'm supposed to play hostess to so many soldiers? Our own force will take care of Prithian before uniting with the others. Our commanders are preparing for it as we speak. You must think you stand a shot at losing if you're bothering to use the cauldron to help you win. The cauldron is victory. It will wipe this world clean again. I lifted my brows in irreverent cynicism. And you need this exact spot to unleash it.
This exact spot, Dagden said, a hand on the hilt of his sword, exists because a person or object of mighty power passed through it. The cauldron will study the work they've already done and magnify it until the wall collapses entirely. It is careful, complex process, and one I doubt your mortal mind can grasp.
Probably. Though this mortal mind did manage to solve Amarantha's riddle and destroy her. Babe, that riddle was real simple. It was a real easy riddle. So sorry. It was real easy. And you didn't kill her. Rasan dead. Just saying. Brana merely turned back to the wall.
Why do you think Hybern let her live for so long in these lands? Better to have someone else do his dirty work.
I had what I needed. Tamlin and Jurian were still off hunting. The royals were preoccupied, and I'd sent the sentries to fetch me more water, claiming that some of my bruises still ached and I wanted to make a poultice for them. They'd looked positively murderous at that. Not at me, but who had given me those bruises. Who had picked Ianthe over them, and Hybern over their honor and people. I'd brought 3 packs, but I'd only need one. The one I'd carefully repacked with Alice's new supplies, now tucked beside everything I'd anticipated needing to get clear of them and go. The one I'd brought with me on every trip out to the wall just in case. And now, I had numbers. I had a purpose. I had a specific location and the names of foreign territories. But more than that, I had a people who had lost faith in their high priestess. I had sentries who were beginning to rebel against their high lord. And as a result of those things, I had Hybern royals doubting the strength of their allies here. I had primed this court to fall. Not from the outside forces, but its own internal warring. And I had to be clear of it before it happened, before the last sliver of my plan fell into place. The party would return without me, and to maintain that illusion of strength, Tamlin and Ianthe would lie about it, where I had gone. And perhaps a day or two after that, one of these sentries would reveal the news, a carefully sprung trap that I'd coiled into his mind like one of my snares. I'd fled for my life, after being nearly killed by the Hybern prince and princess. I'd planted images in his head of my brutalized body, the markings consistent with what Dagden and Brana had already revealed to be their style. He described them in detail, described how he helped me get away before it was too late, how I ran for my life when Tamlin and Ianthe refused to intervene, to risk their alliance with Hybern. And when the sentry revealed the truth, no longer able to stomach keeping quiet, when he saw how my sorry fate was concealed by Tamlin and Ianthe, just as Tamlin had sided with Ianthe the day he'd flogged that sentry. When he described what Hybern had done to me, their cursebreaker, their newly anointed, cauldron blessed, before I'd fled for my life, there would be no further alliance. For there would be no sentry or denizen of this court who would stand with Tamlin or Ianthe after this. After me. I ducked into my tent to grab my pack, my steps light and swift. Listening, barely breathing, I scanned the camp, the woods. A few seconds extra had me snatching Tamlin's bandolier of knives from where he'd left them inside his tent. They'd get in the way while using a bow and arrow, he'd explained that morning. Their weight was considerable as I slung it across my chest. Illyrian fighting knives. Home. I was going home. I didn't bother to look back at that camp as I slipped into the northern tree line. If I winnowed without stopping between leaps, I'd be at the foothills in an hour and would vanish through one of the caves not long after that. I made it about 100 yards into the cover of the trees before I halted. I heard Lucian first. Back off. A low female laugh. Everything in me went still and cold at that sound. I'd heard it once before. In Rasan's memory. Keep going. They were distracted, horrible as it was. Keep going, keep going, keep going. I thought you'd seek me out after the rite, Ianthe purred. They couldn't be more than 30 feet through the trees, far enough away not to hear my presence if I was quiet enough.
I was obliged to perform the rite,
Lucian snapped.
That night wasn't the product of desire, believe me.
We had fun, you and I.
I'm a mated male now.
He's not interested. You don't want it. Leave him alone. He doesn't want it. Every second was the ringing of my death knell. I'd primed everything to fall. I'd long since stopped feeling any sort of guilt or doubt about my plan, not with Alice now safely away. And yet... You don't act that way with Feyre, a silk-wrapped threat.
You're mistaken.
Am I? Twigs and leaves crunched, as if she was circling him. You put your hands all over her. Is she drinking when something happens in the book? Sorry, is me? Oh, me? Yes. Whenever they say the word mate or mated or some variation of that, I have to take a shot because they say it so much. It's a whole thing. I've been fairly lucky this particular reading, but I still have had to take a fair few shots. There have been worse nights. I had done my job too well, provoked her jealousy too much with every instance I'd found ways to get Lucian to touch me in her presence, in Tamlin's presence.
Do not touch me,
he growled, and then I was moving. I masked the sound of my footfalls, silent as a panther as I stalked to that little clearing where they stood, where Lucian stood, back against a tree, twin bands of blue stone shackled around his wrists. She fucking shackled him up to do this? Bitch! I'd seen them before. On Reese, to immobilize his power. Stone hewn from Hybern's rotted land, capable of nullifying magic. And in this case, holding Lucian against that tree as Ianthe surveyed him like a snake before a meal. She slid a hand over the broad panes of his chest, his stomach. And Lucian's eyes shot to me as I stepped between the trees, fear and humiliation reddening his golden skin. That's enough, I said. They whipped her head to me. Her smile was innocent, simpering. But I saw her note the pack, Tamlin's bandolier. Dismiss them. I am also upset, Jadeg, but I'm glad Feyre is stopping this. We were in the middle of a game, weren't we, Lucian? He didn't answer. And the sight of those shackles on him, whoever she trapped him, the sight of her hand still on his stomach. We'll return to camp when we're done, she said, turning to him again. Her hand slid lower, not for his own pleasure, but simply to throw it in my face that she could. I struck. Not with my knives or magic, but my mind. I ripped down the shield I'd kept up around her to avoid the twins' control and slammed myself into her consciousness. A mask over a face of decay. That's what it was like to go inside that beautiful head and find such hideous thoughts inside it. A trail of males she'd used her power on or outright forced to bed, convinced of her entitlement to them. I pulled back against the tug of those memories, mastering myself. Take your hands off him. She did. Unshackle him. Lucian's skin drained of color as Ianthe obeyed me, her face queerly vacant, pliant. The blue stone shackles thumped to the mossy ground. Lucian's shirt was askew, the top button on his pants already undone. The roaring that filled my mind was so loud I could barely hear myself as I said, "Pick up that rock." Lucian remained pressed against the tree, and he watched in silence as Ianthe stooped to pick up a gray, rough rock about the size of an apple. Put your right hand on the boulder. She obeyed, though a tremor went down her spine. Her mind thrashed and struggled against me, like a fish snared on a line. I dug my mental talons in deeper, and some inner voice of hers began screaming. Smash your hand with the rock as hard as you can until I tell you to stop. The hand she'd put on him, on so many others. Ianthe brought the stone up. The first impact was a muffled, wet thud. The second was an actual crack. Third drew blood. Her arm rose and fell, her body shuddering with the agony. And I said to her very clearly, "You will never touch another person against their will. You will never convince yourself that they truly want your advances, that they're playing games. You will never know another's touch unless they initiate, unless it's desired by both sides." Thud, thwack, crack, thud. You will not remember what happened here. You will tell the others that you fell. Her ring finger had shifted in the wrong direction. You are allowed to see a healer to set the bones, but not to erase the scarring. And every time you look at that hand, you are going to remember that touching people against their will has consequences. And if you do it again, everything you are will cease to exist. You will live with that terror every day and never know where it originates. Only the fear of something chasing you, hunting you, waiting for you the instant you let your guard down. Silent tears of pain flowed down her face. You can stop now. Right, Jada? She's letting her off so easy. Fuck. The bloodied rock tumbled onto the grass. Her hand was little more than cracked bones wrapped in shredded skin. Kneel here until someone finds you. Ianthe fell to her knees, her ruined hand leaking blood onto her pale robes. I debated slitting her throat this morning, I told her. I debated it all last night while you slept beside me. I've debated it every single day since I learned you sold out my sisters to Highburn. I smiled a bit. But I think this is a better punishment. And I hope you live a long, long life, Ianthe, and never know a moment's peace. I stared down at her for a moment longer, tying off the tapestry of words and commands I'd woven into her mind, and turned to Lucian. He'd fixed his pants and his shirt. His wide eyes slid from her to me, then to the bloodied stone. The word you're looking for, Lucian, crooned a deceptively light female voice, is Daemate. We whirled toward Brana and Dagden as they stepped into the clearing, grinning like wolves. Right, Dean was saying she'll never know why she's scared. She's just like, I'm just fucking terrified. Isn't that awful? She's just given her anxiety. She's just given her an anxiety disorder. Awesome! You've just given a woman mental illness. Oh my god. Okay, guys. This is the last chapter of part 1, so we are finishing it today. And I'm very excited about it. I just need to this full. Let's go, chapter 10. Ugh, I'm disgusting. I'm so sorry. Brana ran her fingers through Ianthe's golden hair, clicked her tongue at the bloodied pulp cradled in her lap. Going somewhere, Feyre? I let my mask drop. I have places to be, I told the Highburn Royals, noting the flanking positions they were too casually establishing around me. What could be more important than assisting us? You are, after all, sworn to assist our king. Time. Biding their time until Tam returned from hunting with Jurian. Lucian shoved off the tree, but didn't come to my side. Something like agony flickered across his face as he finally noted the stolen bandolier, the pack on my shoulders. I have no allegiance to you, I told Brana, even as Dagdan began to edge past my line of sight. I am a free person, allowed to go where and when I will it. Are you? Brana mused, sliding a hand to her sword on her hip. I pivoted slightly to keep Dagdan from slipping into my blind spot. Such careful plotting these weeks. Such skilled maneuvering. You didn't seem to worry that we'd do something, that we'd be doing the same. They weren't letting Lucian leave this clearing alive. Or at least with his mind intact. He seemed to realize it at the same moment I did, understanding that there was no way they'd reveal this without knowing they'd get away with it. Take the spring cord, I said, and meant it. It's going to fall one way or another. Lucian snarled. I ignored him. Oh, we intend to, Brana said, sword inching free of its dark sheath. But then there's the matter of you. I thumbed free 2 of the Illyrian fighting knives. Haven't you wondered at the headaches? How things seem a little muffled on certain mental bonds. My powers had tired so swiftly, had become weaker and weaker these weeks. Dagdan snorted and finally observed to his sister. I'd give her about 10 minutes before the apple sets in. Shit. Brana chuckled, towing the blue stone shackle.
We gave the priestess the powder at first. Crushed Fabane stone, ground so fine you couldn't see or scent or taste it in your food. She'd add a little at a time. Nothing suspicious, not too much, lest it stifle all your powers at once.
Unease began to clench my gut.
We've been Daimati for 1,000 years, girl, Dagden sneered. Though we didn't even need to slip into her mind to get her to do our bidding. But you? What a valiant effort you put up, trying to shield them all from us.
Jesus Christ, guys. They're scheming too. And more than her, I'm worried about it. Dagden's mind speared for Lucian's. A dark arrow shot between them. I slammed up a shield between them. In my head, my very bones ached. What apple? I bit out. The one you shoved down your throat an hour ago, Brana said. Grown and tended in the king's personal garden. Fed a steady diet of water laced with Fabane. Enough to knock out your powers for a few days straight. No shackles required. And here you are, thinking no one had noticed you planned to vanish today. She clicked her tongue again. Our uncle would be most displeased if we allowed that to happen. I was running out of borrowed time. I could winnow, but then I'd abandon Lucian to them if he somehow couldn't manage to himself with the Fabane in his system from the food at the camp. Leave him. I should and could leave him, but to a fate perhaps worse than death. His russet eye gleamed. Go. I made my choice. I exploded into night and smoke and shadow. And even 1,000 years wasn't enough for Dagden to adequately prepare as I winnowed in front of him and struck. I sliced through the front of his leather armor, not deep enough to kill, and as steel snagged into its plates, he twisted expertly, forcing me to either expose my right side or lose the knife. I winnowed again. This time, Dagden went with me. I was not fighting Highburn cronies unaware in the woods. I was not fighting the Ator and its ilk in the streets of Valaris. Dagden was a Highburn prince. Commander. He fought like one. Winnow, strike. Winnow, strike. We were a black whirlwind of steel and shadow through the clearing, and months of Cassian's brutal training clicked into place as I kept my feet under me. I had the vague sense of Lucian gaping, even Brana taken aback by my show of skill against her brother. But Dagden's blows weren't hard. No, they were precise and swift, but he didn't throw himself into it wholly. Buying time, wearing me down until my body fully absorbed that apple and its power rendered me nearly mortal. So I hit him where he was weakest. Brana screamed as a wall of flame slammed into her. Dagden lost his focus for all of a heartbeat. His roar as I sliced deep into his abdomen shook the birds from the trees. You little bitch! He spat, dancing back from my next blow as the fire cleared and Brana was revealed on her knees. Her physical shield had been sloppy. She'd expected me to attack her mind. She was shuddering, gasping with agony. The reek of charred skin now drifted to us, directly from her right arm, her ribs, her thigh. Dagden lunged for me again, and I brought up both of my knives to meet his blade. He didn't pull the blow this time. I felt its reverberation in every inch of my body, felt the rising, stifling silence, too. I'd felt it once before, that day in Highburn. Brana surged to her feet with a sharp cry. But Lucian was there. Her focus wholly on me, on taking me from the beauty I'd burned from her. On taking from me the beauty I'd burned from her, Brana did not see him winnow until it was too late. Until Lucian's sword refracted the light of the sun leaking through the canopy, and then met flesh and bone. A tremor shuddered through the clearing, like some thread between the twins had been snapped as Brana's dark head thudded onto the grass. Dagden screamed, launching himself at Lucian, winnowing across the 15 feet between us. Lucian had barely heaved his blade out of Brana's severed neck when Dagden was before him, sword shoving forward to ram through his throat. Lucian only had enough time to stumble back from Dagden's killing blow. I had enough time to stop it. I parried Dagden's blade aside with one knife, the male's eyes going wide as I winnowed between them, and punched the other into his eye, right into the skull behind it. Bone and blood and soft tissue scraped and slid along the blade. Dagden's mouth still open with surprise as I yanked out the knife. I let him fall atop his sister, the thud of flesh on flesh, the only sound. I merely looked at Ianthe, my power guttering, a hideous ache building in my gut, and made my last command, amending my earlier ones. You tell them I killed them, in self-defense, after they hurt me so badly while you and Tamlin did nothing. Even when they torture you for the truth, you say that I fled after I killed them to save this court from their horrors. Blank, vacant eyes were my only answer.
Feyre,
Lucian's voice was a hoarse rasp. I merely wiped my 2 knives on Dagden's back before going to reclaim my fallen pack.
you're going back to the Night Court.
I shouldered my heavy pack and finally looked at him. Yes. His tan face had paled, but he surveyed Ianthe, the 2 dead royals.
I'm going with you.
No, was all I said, heading for the trees. A cramp formed deep in my belly. I had to get away, had to use the last of my power to winnow to the hills.
You won't make it without magic,
he warned me. I just gritted my teeth against the sharp pain in my abdomen as I rallied my strength to winnow to those distant foothills. But Lucian gripped my arm, halting me.
I'm going with you,
he said again, face splattered with blood as bright as his hair.
I'm getting my mate back.
Damn it. There was no time for this argument, for the truth and debate and the answers I saw he desperately wanted. Tamlin and the others would have heard the shouting by now. Don't make me regret this, I told him. Blood coated the inside of my mouth by the time we reached the foothills hours later. I was panting, my head throbbing, my stomach a twisting knot of aching. Lucian was barely better off, his winnowing as shaky as my own before we halted amongst the rolling green and he doubled over, hands braced on his knees.
It's gone,
he said, gasping for breath.
My magic. Not an ember. They must have dosed all of us today.
And given me a poisoned apple just to make sure it kept me down. My power pulled away from me like a wave reeling back from the shore. Only there was no return. It just went further and further out into a sea of nothing. I peered at the sun, now a hand's width above the horizon, shadows already thick and heavy between the hills. I took my bearings, sorting through the knowledge I'd compiled these weeks. I stepped northward, swaying. Lucian gripped my arm.
You're taking a door?
I slid aching eyes towards him. Yes. The caves. Doors, they called them. And these hollows led to other pockets of Prythian. I'd taken one straight under the mountain. I would now take one to get me home. or as close to it as I could get. No door to the night court existed, here or anywhere. And I would not risk my friends by bringing them here to retrieve me, no matter that the bond between Reese and me couldn't so much as feel it. A numbness had spread through me. I needed to get out. Now.
The Autumn Court portal is that way.
Warning and reproach. I can't go into summer. They'll kill me on sight. Silence. He released my arm. I swallowed, my throat so dry I could barely do so. The only other door here leads under the mountain. We sealed off all the other entrances. If we go there, we could wind up trapped. Or have to return. Then we go to Autumn. And from there, I trailed off before I finished. Home. But Lucian gleaned it anyway, and seemed to realize then that's what the night court was. Home. I could almost see the word in his russet eye as he shook his head. Later. I gave him a silent nod. Yes. Later we'd have it all out.
The Autumn Court will be as dangerous as summer,
he warned. I just need somewhere to hide, to lie low until we can winnow again. A faint buzzing and ringing filled my ears, and I felt my magic vanish entirely.
I know a place,
Lucian said, walking toward the cave that would take us to his home. Thanks, Sote. We'll see you over there. We're almost done. Walking toward the cave that would take us to his home, to the lands of his family who'd betrayed him as badly as this court had betrayed mine. We hurried through the hills, swift and silent as shadows. The cave for the Autumn Court had been left unguarded. Lucian looked at me over his shoulder, as if to ask if I, too, had been responsible for the lack of guards who were always stationed here. I gave him another nod. I'd slid into their minds before we'd left, making sure this door would be left open. Cassian had taught me to always have a second escape route. Always. Lucian paused before the swirling gloom of the cave mouth, the blackness like a worm poised to devour us both. A muscle feathered in his jaw. I said, "Stay if you want. What's done is done." For Highburn was coming. Already here. I had debated it for weeks, whether it was better to claim the Spring Court for ourselves or to let it fall to our enemies. But it could not remain neutral. A barrier between our forces in the north and the humans in the south. It would have been easy to call in Reese and Cassian, to have the latter bring in an Illyrian legion to claim the territory when it was weakest after my own maneuverings, depending on how much mobility Cassian had retained, if he was still healing. Yet then we'd hold one territory, with 5 other courts between us. Sympathy might have swayed for the Spring Court. Others might have joined Highburn against us, considering our conquest here proof of our wickedness. But if Spring fell to Highburn, we could rally the other courts to us. Change is won from the north, drawing Highburn in close.
You were right,
Lucian declared at last.
That girl I knew did die under the mountain.
I wasn't sure if it was an insult, but I nodded all the same. At least we can agree on that. I stepped into the awaiting cold and dark. Lucian fell into step beside me as we strode beneath the archway of curved, crude stone, our blades out as we left behind the warmth and green of eternal spring. And in the distance, so faint I thought I might have imagined it, a beast's roar cleaved the land. That was part 1. It is done. Ooh. Okay, so soon we're gonna see the Autumn Court. I gotta know what it's like. I gotta see how bad they are. I'm hoping there's somebody good there, too, that surprises us. Ah, that was so exciting. It was so exciting. So yeah, we will be back on Wednesday, when we will start part 2. I'm so excited about it. But for now, we are gonna raid Sote. You all have a lovely rest of your evening, and I will see you at Gloss over on Oh No It's Jackie later on tonight at 8 o'clock. So have a great night, everybody. I love you all very much. And come back here on Wednesday for more book time. Yay! Bye. Starting the raid.